Tell me when you're ready to go.
We're ready. I'm going to leave that here for now for part of your introduction.
Okay.
And then I'll.
Good evening and welcome to this forum for the Missouri House District 1934 and 35, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Kansas City, Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties. I am Cheryl Barnes and I am a member of this league. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We neither screen nor endorse candidates. Our mission is to empower voters and to defend our democracy. We envision a democracy where every citizen has the knowledge, the right, the desire, and the confidence to participate. Our membership is open to everyone. We're here for this voter education event to provide an opportunity for you to ask questions and listen as the candidates present their positions. Voters have submitted questions via email at forumquestions@lwv.org. Forumquestions@lwv.org. If you have a last-minute question, you can send it in now. All of the candidates running for the Missouri House District 1934 and 35 were invited to participate in our forum tonight. Each term is for 2 years. We welcome and appreciate these candidates. I'd like for you to know the other league members volunteering with me tonight. Our timekeeper is Elizabeth Darr. Our Zoom board is monitored by Terry Lane. Our legislative forum coordinator is Anitra Steele. This forum will be recorded and is being recorded and available and archived on the league's webpage, lwvkc.org. lwvkc.org. The candidates will answer each question in random order that I've already shared with the candidates. Each will have 90 seconds to respond to your questions. Candidates, please answer the question asked and stick to the topic. There will be no rebuttals, but you can go back to an issue during your closing remarks, for which you are allotted 2 minutes. Let us begin. And the first question is, what do you bring to the candidacy? What do you bring to your job? And we will start with Ms. Burnett, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank the League for carrying on your time-honored tradition of organizing and promoting these forums. They're a critical influence on keeping voters informed of the issues that affect our candidates and our communities. I've participated in numerous League forums, and I can assure the audience that they set the standard for being fair and informative. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to advance democracy. I'm State Representative Ingrid Burnett, and for the last 6 years, I have represented portions of Kansas City's historic Northeast, along the Missouri River into Sugar Creek and Independence. As I enter my final 2-year term, should I be reelected, the newly drawn district lines encompass Northeast City Market and Kansas City's West Side neighborhoods, as well as a small portion of the East Side. In Jefferson City, I have a reputation for strong leadership within the Democratic caucus, and I strive to advance legislation that protects our quality of life for Missourians, no matter where they live. I believe the key essential elements for that are quality and affordable housing, healthcare, education, and recreation, including arts and entertainment. It has been an honor beyond measure to serve the people of Missouri in this manner, and I look forward to completing my last 2-year term should I be reelected in November. Thank you for your interest and participation.
Thank you. Ms. Spalding, what brings you to the candidacy? What unique properties do you have to bring to the candidacy?
Well, what I think I bring to the candidacy, being a candidate, is that I bring choice. You know, for 20 years, I have been in this area, and every year, general election after election, there's been one candidate. And I think that in District 19, that there's a lot of people that have a lot of different ideas, and it would be nice if they had a choice when they came to the polls. So that's first what I bring. And the second thing that I think I bring is voice. You know, I've been a teacher for 33 years. And when we get together with my family, and my kids are always saying, Mom, can you stop using your teacher voice? And I always say, well, I'm sorry, but you know, I'm so used to doing it that way. And so I do have a voice. And tonight, I'm so glad that the League of Women Voters have given me the opportunity to use that voice on this forum. And I do plan to use that voice to ask my constituency, do you really know what the candidate stands for that you're voting for? You know, it doesn't make any difference who it is. They need to investigate the candidate, look at the party platforms, and just see what those candidates stand for. And if it's a candidate with any kind of integrity, they are going to stand for that platform. So I also bring a lot of personal experiences, and I am just glad to be here and to represent District 19.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
Hey everyone, my name is Wick Thomas. I am a lifetime Missouri resident. I graduated from UMKC. I grew up in rural Missouri and Kansas. I was a librarian for the Kansas City Public Library. I served with them for over 10 years. After that, I was the manager of teen programs for the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. I currently am running a small business. I am working class through and through. I think what I bring to the table is accountability. I am out in the community all the time. I help with parks cleanups. I'm a parks ambassador. I am a master gardener intern through the MU extension, and I'm really active in every part of our district. I'm not accepting any money from corporations or lobbyists. We didn't go after any endorsements this year because what matters to us is the people in the district. And we have been finding a lot of people in the district really want to feel like their voice is heard. I think Missouri needs to stay out of private medical decisions. And I will be adamant about that at the state level. And something that I think informs a lot of my opinions and my thoughts and my views is that I am formerly homeless. So the housing insecurity issue and the rise of rents, everything that's going on right now that is hurting the working class, I know very well. I'm now a homeowner in District 19, so it's a progressive story there. But I am passionate about advocating for this community and making sure that everyone has access to the resources they need.
Thank you. Mr. Crossley, what do you bring to the candidacy?
Well, I bring 34 years of business experience. I ran a small business in Lee Summit. I went to work there at Spalding in 1976. I bought the business in 1988, and I just recently sold it in September of last year. So I have, I don't know how many years of serving people in their homes. So I know what people like and what they dislike. If we could take my business practice of pleasing people in their homes and apply that to state government, if we could apply it to local government, period, but if we could apply that to state government, I think we could turn around people's ideas about what government is and what it isn't. Government is for the people and by the people. Our country was founded on, and the state of Missouri accepted it, is self-governance. And I think we've let it slip away to a group of people that's governing us. And I think some people, myself included, we need more say in how we're governed, and we need to be more part of it. So that's what I hope to bring. And that's what I will bring if I'm elected, is a more of a self-governance type government as opposed to being told how we're going to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Strickler?
Thank you. And thanks to League of Women Voters for hosting this forum, and to all the folks who are watching at home. My name's Kemp Strickler, and I'm running for state representative in House District 34. Because I believe the purpose of government is to create better opportunities for our citizens, all our citizens. My wife, Christy, and I have lived here in Lee Summit for 36 years. We raised our daughter here, and we feel real fortunate to live here in Lee Summit. It's a vibrant city, a great place to live, and I want to make sure that our state government is working for our citizens and for our community. As to what I bring to the table, I'm recently retired. after 35 years at Hallmark Cards, where I worked my way up from an entry-level position to a senior data analytics manager. I led teams throughout my career at Hallmark, as well as serving in leadership roles in organizations such as the Lee Summit Arts Council, University of Missouri advisory boards, local nonprofits, and my church. So I believe that my background leading research and data analytics teams has provided me the experience needed to listen to constituents, to understand the implications of the data that we see, and to work together to implement common sense solutions to the challenges facing all Missourians. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ingles?
Hi, my name is Keri Ingle, and for the last 4 years, I've had the honor of being the state representative for House District 35, which is currently Western Lee Summit, a little bit of Longview Lake area. It goes north to Bannister Road and south to Shear Road. With redistricting, that changes a little bit, and it adds a little bit more of Raytown and Kansas City all the way up to Noland Road. And so a little bit about myself, I'm a social worker, and that drives every decision I make and every policy that I look at through a social work lens. The state motto is Salus Populi Suprema Lex Esto, which is let the welfare of the people be the supreme law. I take that to heart with every piece of legislation that I look at. My background, I've worked in child welfare, I've worked in mental health, I've worked in hospital settings and school settings. And with everything that I do, I try to put the interest of the most vulnerable among us at the forefront of everything that I do. I'm also a mother of 2 young children who inspired me to run for office. I want to make Missouri a place that they can prosper, that they can be educated, and that they can achieve the American dream here without having to go out of state to do so. And so every day in my work, I try to make Missouri a little bit better for all of us.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Thomas. What Missouri gun laws need to be changed? And you're on mute there.
A lot of them. So I grew up in rural Missouri, right? So I know that gun issues there are really different than gun issues in my neighborhood. I hear gunshots almost every night here. The Missouri state government should not be choosing for Kansas City what Kansas City's gun laws are. So I think the first thing that we need to do is return that power to Kansas City. I think, Republicans talk a lot about not overreaching in the state or in government, and yet Missouri continues to make laws that prohibit local governments from governing themselves as they see fit. So we need to change that. We need to get the Republican big gun government out of. We need to change all of that. We need to have mandatory background checks. We need to have waiting periods. It's ridiculous that, I am a firm believer in the Second Amendment. I think everyone should have the right to bear arms. I also think that the part of the Second Amendment we forget is well-regulated. Well-regulated, and it is not well-regulated right now. Their murder rate in Kansas City is astronomically high. So I would be a big advocate for returning, first of all, the powers back to local government.
Thank you. Mr. Strickler. What
Yes.
Missouri gun laws? Go ahead.
Yes. Let me start by saying I support the Second Amendment as well, and believe that law-abiding citizens should have the right to protect themselves. But we've seen with the tragedies in Uvalde, in Buffalo, in countless other places, that we need to do more to keep guns out of the hands of people who clearly shouldn't have them. I believe the legislature needs to implement some reasonable reforms to protect our families. And these kind of reforms, such as universal background checks, red flag laws, and closing the boyfriend loophole, they're common sense changes that the vast majority of Missourians support and that I believe the legislature should implement.
Thank you. Mr. Burrows, 1, you're on mute, but 2, we're asking questions in random order. And this question is, what Missouri gun laws need to be changed? And you are number 7. So it is your time, lucky 7, to respond to that question, and then we'll go through the rest of the candidates. So
Thank
you have 90 seconds to answer.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, I think it's pretty obvious that the worst gun violence occurs in cities that typically have the most stringent gun restrictions, and restrictive gun laws are typically ignored by criminals. Right now, we're seeing violent crimes rising in our cities, and I think that you can point to the policy of defunding the police as only making the matters worse. And it's placing greater restrictions on firearm ownership. That only harms the everyday citizen who's finding that right now they have to be their own first responder. And to give you an example, we have a city in Missouri that is #1 for homicide rates in the nation, and that's St. Louis. And you've got a federal rep, a congresswoman, who her policy is to defund the police. You can't have these two things. You want to control access to guns. You're ultimately, I feel like the people who are living in the cities where defunding the police is going to have the greatest impact on them, they need to have unrestricted access to things to defend themselves. And far be it for me to tell them what they can or cannot have. Right now, we're our own first responders. I submit that we should increase funding for state and local police and refocus the debate away from guns and toward what is the cause of violence in our cities, and identifying that, and then focusing on programs that would actually address violence. Because, you know, our situation right now is that we've got 400 gun deaths from long guns last year alone, but over 100,000 deaths from fentanyl coming across our borders.
Thank you. Thank you. And are you noticing the timer? Did you happen to notice the
Did see it.
timer?
I'm sorry, I ran over. Sorry. Yep.
No worries. I just want to make sure you knew that it was there. Mr. Crossley.
Yeah. Well, the Second Amendment is extremely important to Americans, and in particular Missourians. And a lot of people feel very strongly. I think most people support the Second Amendment. I believe that's where we might split up on how people feel safe. The people that use guns against other people are by the very act they do are criminals. They're not law-abiding citizens. When we look at the mass shootings that we have, where someone just for whatever reason starts killing people indiscriminately, the majority of those people have mental health problems. They shouldn't have had a gun to begin with, and a lot of them have guns. Some of them get them legally, but most of them obtain them illegally. We're never going to get rid of guns in America. There's too many of them. Nobody's going to turn them in. So we need to concentrate on people's mental health. I think the people that are, I'm not real big on red flag laws, because they're just, you do away with due process when you rat on your neighbor, and you do away with due process. So getting rid of due process is important, but we do need to concentrate on the people that have mental health issues. That's one of the key problems. So I'm done.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Ingle? What
Thank
Missouri
you.
gun laws need to be changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start with repealing the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which basically makes it to where state law enforcement cannot interact with federal law enforcement. So we've had dozens and dozens of law enforcement officials from across the state who have said that they've been unable to work with both the ATF and the DEA to keep illegal weapons out of the state of Missouri. It also makes it to where Missouri cannot work with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was the large bipartisan gun bill that was passed that would add in mental health funding, crisis intervention, school safety programs, enhanced background checks for those under 21, as well as the boyfriend's loophole, which has been mentioned before. So that would be the first thing that I would look at doing, would be repealing SAPA, or the Second Amendment Preservation Act. It's a clear violation of the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution as well. And there are numerous lawsuits regarding it right now. But sheriffs across the state and law enforcement say that it makes their job far more difficult And it makes it really difficult to prosecute crimes and to work with federal law enforcement. I also support mental health funding, but I want to note that generally speaking, people who are mentally ill are more at risk of suicidality or of being a victim of violent crime than a perpetrator. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burnett?
Thank you. Gosh, we've covered just about all of the laws that we have in Missouri right now. I would say that in my experience, first of all, I agree fully with Representative Ingle on repealing SAPA. There is appetite to do that across both aisles or both parties. I think the intent, I think there were unintended consequences from the passage of SAPA that were not foreseen by the people who sponsored it. And we are hearing from our law enforcement people that it really makes their job more difficult. I support red flag legislation that would alert us to people who should not be in possession of a weapon right now. What concerns me most about what we're seeing with guns in our state today is that it's the highest rate of death in children is gun violence. So buyback programs, red flag laws, repealing SAPA, we have an appetite for the boyfriend, closing that loophole. Those are the things that I would support and do.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Spalding?
Yes. The theory behind gun control is that you're taking guns out of circulation, like the buyback program, or you're having harder, more background checks or that kind of thing, longer waiting periods to receive those guns after they're purchased. And those are great ideas, but they just don't seem like that in the long run that it could be enforceable. And especially because according to the Department of Justice, almost 90% of the firearms used in crimes are not purchased by retail. They're purchased under the table or other ways. I even heard on the news that a mother of one of the shooters said that her son had purchased the parts of the gun separately and put it together himself. So, I mean, that's really premeditated when you do something like that. And so it seems to me like the plans that they have suggested really hurt the people like you and me who are purchasing our guns legally. When we purchased our guns, we even, went to gun classes. So I would say that when people purchase guns, retail, they should take a gun class. It should be required, or at least suggested and offered that to the people. So I would like to see more gun safety classes required, and I think that would help, as well as
Thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Strickler, and that is, Missouri's current law does not allow an abortion for victims of rape and incest. What are your plans to add additional state funds for coverage to support women and girls with health care, education, housing, counseling, and childcare services? Mr. Strickler.
Get myself off mute. So let me start by saying I trust women and their doctors to make the best decisions for their own health care. I think it's a very personal, a very private decision, and I don't believe the government should be in the middle of these decisions. I also want to say that I think by any standard, the trigger law that Missouri Republicans passed is both extreme and ambiguous. There are no exceptions for 10-year-olds who are raped. The way it's written now, doctors are unclear about when they can treat ectopic pregnancies that threaten the life of the mom. We've seen in Kansas City that hospitals are unclear on when they can provide or whether they can provide contraception to rape victims. So, when this bill was passed, so many legislators didn't know what was in the bill, but they voted along party lines for it anyway. And I believe we need representatives who understand the implications of their votes and the impact that they're really going to have on people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burnett?
Thank you for the question. I'm got a little bit of distraction going on here. I'm sorry if it comes through. Our dog is reacting to someone at the door. So the things that happen. So I think your question had to do with what kind of support services are we going to put in place? And that's going to be, those are things that are going to come through the budget. And as a member sitting on the budget committee, those are the programs that I support, getting education, appropriate sex education that's medically accurate to all of our students, supporting our mothers who are challenged by a pregnancy that they did not intend or don't think that they can support. And I agree with the earlier speaker that this House bill is so vague around the ban that we have that it puts women in danger. Missouri has the highest maternal mortality rate in the state. And I believe that this law puts women at risk with high-risk pregnancies.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas? You're on mute there.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I feel like it's probably pretty obvious I am 100% pro-choice. I think we skirt around the issue a lot, but this is an awful law that was passed. It has to be repealed. First of all, that I get that that's not an easy process, but it's something that we will realize eventually, if not immediately, is horrible for Missouri. Any forced birth in any form is a terrible thing, and especially from a state government that then provides no support services afterwards. So I mean, we can't talk about forcing birth without talking about mandatory maternal leave. We can't talk about forced birth without assistance programs in place to help people who are forced to bear children against their will by the Missouri state government. We have to, if we're going to do that, then we have to have a support system in place for these people. So that would be my immediate goal, would be to create that support system for people who are forced to have children that, again, the Missouri state government forces them to have. After that, it would be to be a outspoken advocate to repeal that law. Reproductive justice, access to abortion is healthcare.
Thank you. Ms. Ingle?
Yes, thank you. As someone who's investigated child sexual abuse in Jackson County, I think people will be appalled at how often this actually occurs. That this is a very, very real thing that children in our community will face. It's absolutely appalling. Even the most conservative amongst my colleagues and my constituents support exceptions for rape and incest. This just absolutely goes beyond the pale. The idea that children would be forced to bear their rapist child is absolutely antithetical to American freedom. So I'm appalled by that, number one. Number two, if the question is regarding what would I do to help address victims of sexual assault that are forced to bear children, I would start by saying that Missouri has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the nation. In fact, it's that of a third world country. And so I would first start with where we would start funding prenatal care, ongoing prenatal care, and then postnatal care as well. I would also support expanding the funding for sexual assault nurse examiners for organizations like MOXA here in our community, as well as child protection centers and forensic interview centers, as well as law enforcement and prosecutors, so we make sure that these perpetrators are prosecuted.
Thank you. Mr. Crossley?
Hi, well, this is a hard subject to talk about in 90 seconds, but I'll try. I believe life begins at conception. And so my view on abortion is it's taken a life. And let me restate that. Elective abortion. I believe there's abortions that occur naturally. It's a medical term. It's not abortion happens with a lot of women just reject, for whatever reason, their body rejects the pregnancy. And then oftentimes women find themselves with a pregnancy that occurs outside of the uterus that needs medical attention. And those are protected by the law to have those. A lot of people use this abortions like that that need to have abortion. They are misstating what the law says. It is clear about that, but it's a life, and I cannot get my mind around how it's okay to end a life, an innocent life. I can't imagine what it'd be like to be a woman to find herself pregnant and doesn't want to be. I can't imagine what that's like. I can't. But I do know that it's a life, and ending it, I could never vote for ending an innocent life. So,
Thank you.
you bet.
Ms. Spalding?
Yes, I also believe that that there are ways that you keep from getting pregnant, and I think that people are not being responsible. Now, I'm not talking about the rapist, and I'm not talking about incest or anything like that. I am talking the majority of the abortions that have been performed in Missouri and around the country are for birth control, or they didn't take the proper procedure before. We have all kinds of birth control out there. And I would like to see people being responsible, you know, and they talk about a woman's body. They're not being responsible with their own body. You know, if they don't want children, I'm pretty sure they know how that happens. And they need to step up and do the right thing. Now, about the other situations, if it's a medical procedure, that's what an abortion for to save a mother's life is called. It's not called abortion. It's called a medical procedure, and the doctor and the mother decides about that. Also, there are other situations dealing with birth defects, and so we're not talking about that. So if you want to do emergency clauses for incest and sexual abuse, that would be fine with me. But otherwise, I like the abortion law like it is. Just add a clause.
Thank you. Mr. Burrows?
Well, I can see both sides of the issue on this. You know, as abortion is not an enumerated right under the Constitution, I do believe that it was appropriate for the Supreme Court to remand the decision to the states, and most specifically to the population for democratic vote on this. I firmly believe these issues should be determined by state legislatures who represent their constituents. Most Missourians currently agree that abortion should be limited to cases where the life of the mother is at risk. I personally embrace the life of the mother and the child. And as most abortions are now currently illegal in the state of Missouri, I support legislation and our programs that will provide support for the mother and the baby. Services such as appropriate sexual education, provide for support services for both women and children. And something that hasn't been mentioned yet, adoption should be easy and it should be inexpensive. And it's currently neither of those things right now. It's a nightmare to try to adopt. And I would personally support legislation that would make it so that if you had a mother with an unwanted child, we could make it significantly easier for those couples out there who are struggling to conceive to have access to these children so that they can shower them with love and affection. I've been in that boat. I know what it's like, and I can speak to that.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Ms. Spalding. Do you think there's a conflict with the Missouri Constitution of separation of church and state if any public funds are given to parochial religious schools?
No. The reason why is because I have taught in church schools. In my experience, at one time when I was waiting for my husband to get a job. And so I took a job in a parochial school. And I'm just saying that parents should have a choice. And I think that to deny any school funds for those children to get a good education is not the right thing. And the reason why I say that is because I'm a public school teacher and I love public school. And I've had good experiences there, but I know that there are some schools that the children do not feel safe. And if their parents, they can't study, they can't learn when they're worried about things all the time. And so I really believe that if you're in a situation like that, then the parents should have the option to get a voucher or get something that would allow them to take their children to a safe place so that they could learn. I know that even in Kansas City schools, that some neighborhoods aren't safe. And I've had children come to my classroom to live with relatives because they heard gunshots and their school wasn't safe. So they came to another school that was safe.
Thank you. Mr. Crossley, is there a conflict with the Missouri Constitution of separation of church and state if public funds are given to parochial religious schools?
No, and I base that answer on if a parent decides where their children go to school, and they do now, it's if they choose to send them to a parochial school, they have to pay the bill. And the reason a lot of parents choose a parochial school, some do it for religious reasons. Some do it because they're not happy with what's being taught in the public school form. My children both went to Lee Summit. I went to Lee Summit schools. I had a great public school education. My children went to public school. The problem is what they're teaching in school now is not education. I hate using the word indoctrination. It sounds horrible, but they're indoctrinating them into a way of thinking that's not traditional. That's not what I learned in Lee Summit. We was very involved with our children's education. We would go down to the teacher where they were teaching at that time. This is, I'm going to say 25 years ago. They were 30 years ago. They were teaching them meditation and stuff that had nothing to do with education. And I disagree with it. And meditation is a religion. I don't think public schools should be teaching religion in any form. They often teach about Islam in public school now, trying to understand. We have new arrivals in our country that are quite different, but they should not be teaching about that. I think parents need choice. Used to be that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ingle?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think it's a violation of the separation of church and state in the Missouri Constitution. And one of the things I talk to constituents about who are very much proponents of private school educations and vouchers is that when you accept taxpayer funds, you accept taxpayer oversight. And so if you do not want the additional oversight from DESE and the legislature, then you probably don't want to have the public funds accompanying it. I would also say that when we're talking about parochial schools, we're talking about all religious schools. And so they would all be subject to public funding. Most of the private schools and the parochial schools in the area have scholarship programs. Often they are done through those churches, through tithing, through donations. They are nonprofits and they are able to do that way. And they are out of that really heavy oversight that they do not want from DESE. And they are able to accommodate children who want to attend their schools, even if their parents cannot pay for it. And so I would say that for the good of the private schools, it's probably in their best interest that they not receive public funding if they do not want that additional oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Strickler?
Yeah, well, I will say I don't believe that public funding should go to private and parochial schools. I think it's in the name. Public funding should stay with public schools that have public oversight. Likewise, I think private schools should be supported by private funding, not public funding either directly through vouchers or indirectly through state-supported scholarships. And I've got to address one thing that Mr. Crossley had said, which was that he was talking about the indoctrination happening in public schools. And very honestly, with having a wife who is a public school teacher who very recently retired, I think that is those are some of the sound bites that are being used to defund our public schools. And I think it's absolutely wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, hey everyone. So I am 100% in agreement. I think that public funding by its very nature should not be going to private religious institutions. And if it is going to go to private religious institutions, like people before me said, then there needs to be public oversight. I think it is very obviously, for all involved, even people who pretend like it's not, a violation of not just the state constitution, but also the federal constitution. Is again, very clear that that was the intention of the founding fathers, was to keep public funds or any kind of state religion away out of our government. That was, again, very, very clear in both constitutions. And that being said, this is something like, so here, I'm gonna pull this out. It is something I go to a lot, right? It's all tabbed and highlighted, and I return to it all the time. It informs a lot of my personal feelings and beliefs. It does not inform anyone's role in the state government, nor should it. It is very clear that there should be a separation of church and state, that can affect me personally, that I can go back to that, think about it, consider it, but it should not be a state religion. There should be no state religion. Public money should not go to religious institutions.
Thank you. Ms. Burnett?
Yes, thank you. So I can speak to this from a number of perspectives. I spent my first 15 years as an educator in the Catholic schools, as a teacher, and then as a principal. My next 15 years I spent in the public schools as a school counselor. My children attended parochial, private, and public schools. And yes, I believe that public funds should not be spent on parochial schools. And the reason is because we really have shifted our definition and of the purpose that we have for public schools. The purpose of our public schools is to assure that every child that lives within the boundaries of that public school district has access to an education opportunity. And it's our job to make sure, because we require that. We have truancy laws and we require children to be in school. And if we require that, then we are obligated to provide an opportunity for them to get that. Beyond that, every parent has an option. No one told me where I could or could not send my children to school. And that is an inalienable right of a parent, I believe, but it is not the role of the government to support religious education.
Thank you. Mr. Burrows?
Yes, ma'am. I would just remind folks that the Kansas City Public School District was unaccredited for over 20 years. To me, it is a patently racist policy to tell parents of children who cannot go anywhere else that you may not have vouchers to go to a school outside of your school district. I think that, the concept of separation of church and state, this comes down to the state shall establish no religion. Okay, this comes from Henry VIII, when he decided that in order to get a divorce, he was going to turn away from the Catholic Church and create the Church of England. Okay, so our founding fathers were looking at it from that regard. This has nothing to do about whether or not you want to spend. And when people talk about taxpayer dollars or public funds, it's my money, it's your money. And if you want to spend it at a school where they happen to have Christian education or they want to teach Sharia, it should be our right to do that. And I think it's patently ridiculous when I've got somebody sitting in Jefferson City or I've got somebody sitting in Washington, D.C. telling me what I can spend my tax dollars on for my own kids' education. And this is why I'm for parental rights with regard to schools right now. I think our number one issue should be to make sure our children are safe in schools. And we also ought to be making sure that they're learning the basics with regard to literacy and STEM. That's what we should be focusing on. This notion of not being able to spend money on schools because they're religious, it's just horse hockey.
Thank you. We're running close to our time, and I want to make sure that you have enough time for your 2-minute response to wrap up. So I'm going to ask you one short question, if you could just give us a yes or no. And that is, would you support local control for the Kansas City Police Department? And we will start with you, Mr. Strickler.
Yes.
Local control.
Yes.
Okay, and then Ms. Burnett,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
I think it's pretty obvious, yes.
Ms. Ingle,
Yes.
Mr. Crossley,
Yes.
Ms. Spalding,
Yes.
and Mr. Burrows.
No.
Okay. I think we're just about, we need to wrap up. So I want to thank the audience for their thought-provoking questions and interest in the election. And remember, the forum will be archived on the League's website, lwvkc.org. So with closing remarks, we're going to start alphabetical order by district, starting with Ms. Burnett, and you'll have 2 minutes to wrap up and give us your closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your dedication to empowering voters and providing these opportunities to engage in our democratic process. One thing we didn't talk about that I think is also important when we are talking about people representing our communities, and that is giving access to state government. And that is one of the things that my office is very good at, is being responsive to constituent concerns when they call and they are having, they need support to get in touch with various state departments in order to conduct their business. And so I just wanted to make sure that we got that out there, that also is a concern that people should be taking into consideration when they consider their vote. I'm State Representative Ingrid Burnett. I'm asking for your support in the August and November elections, and I hope this forum has given enough information about me and my record, but if you would like to know more, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is Ingrid Burnett, 4mo@gmail.com. My website is ingridburnett.com, and I can be found on Facebook and Twitter by searching at Ingrid Burnett. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your participation. I think we've all seen that elections have consequences, and your vote absolutely matters, absolutely matters. Please vote August 2nd and November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Spalding, your closing remarks.
Yes. Most of what we do in our lives, I think, doesn't really have anything to do with government. We form families, we raise children, we choose our occupations, we pray to the God of our choice, and we join civic organizations or other organizations that care for our neighbors in need. But we do need government, and that is why we all are running, is because we care about the people in our districts. We care about our own children, our own grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren to come. And we need to realize that the government is for the people, and that we need to be safe, and defunding the police was, confusing to me, because we need the police in those neighborhoods, especially where there's gun violence, to keep that control of that kind of thing and any kind of violence. and the firemen, and all kinds of safety people. That's where the government comes in and really is important that we have effective leadership. And I believe that I can be that leader. I can give you a choice at the polls, which hasn't been for a while, and District 19, and I can also be your voice. And I would tell you the facts, and I would give recommendations, and I would let you also contact me. And my contact information is Spalding from Missouri @Gmail. That's my email. And then I also have a website, Spalding for Missouri Red and .red. And I just would want to hear from my constituents if I am chosen to be the representative for District 19. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, your closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here, inviting me. Thank you to the other candidates for speaking. I think what I offer, obviously, I have opinions on issues, but what I haven't gotten to talk about is how active I am in the community. So people know that I feel this way about these issues, but I also am out in the community all the time, holding listening forums, holding community conversations, and we bring in a lot of different people with a lot of different views, and we can have conversations about them. I think that's what I offer. I offer an ability to access the state government that isn't currently here. Most of the people I'm talking to in the new boundaries of District 19 don't even know that the district has been gerrymandered, that the district has changed. The state government needs, if they're gonna change district lines, they need to tell people. They need to tell people within those district lines who they're now voting for, what district they're now in, and that hasn't been happening. I just heard, the government stays out of most of the things in our lives. I don't agree with that at all. I have a partner that I'm very worried that our rights are about to be taken away. My family is about to be taken away by the state government, and would be. The Missouri state government has been bullying the LGBT community since 1986. That was the first year they had an anti-gay law on the books. So that's not true. Actually, my ability to create my family, my ability to adopt, my ability to take some of that burden that the Missouri state government has put on all of these children who are, and their mothers who are being forced to birth, like, even though we could help that, we are not being allowed to. So I disagree completely that the state government is not involved in our lives every day. It is involved in mine all the time. And also, I want to say real quick, so many of these questions are just distractions from real issues. Like, corporations and lobbyist money inform so much of what our candidates say they believe, whether they believe it or not. And we know that's true, and it has to stop. It's ridiculous, and we need to get money out of politics. I hope you'll vote for me. I plan to open an office in District 19 so people can have access to me year round. So things have to change.
Thank you. Mr. Crossley?
Yes, I'm not on screen yet. I have to ask everybody that's watching this forum if they're happy with government. And what we're doing year after year is we're increasing the size of government. Government then becomes very intrusive, and we don't like the outcome of it, whether it's if you're on the right or left. People don't like government intruding into their lives. And I don't know of anything that government does well except spend money. And our taxes are being collected. And as John said, there are taxes. They're not the government's money, they're taxpayer money. We hear it called public funding. No, that's not public funding, that's taxpayer funding. And it talks about what program are we going to start? How are we going to take care of women that have found themselves pregnant and they now have a child, and we have all kinds of nutrition programs. We didn't have those when I was young. I'm probably the oldest person on the forum, except maybe the moderators. And my family was, I won't say we was poor, but we were low middle class. We worked hard. When I first started working, I worked 2 or 3 jobs. I owned a business for 34 years. I worked 12 hours a day. I had 13 to 30 employees. All of my employees had health insurance furnished by our company. I don't think government does a lot good. I think the private sector can do a better job than the public sector of about anything. I'll include education. My time's up. Anyway, I hope you
Thank you.
support me for District 34. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Crossley. Mr. Strickler?
Yes, thank you again to the League of Women Voters for giving us the opportunity to participate in this forum. To the people of District 34, I believe you have a clear choice in this race between myself and Mr. Crossley, a choice between a reasonable, common sense candidate like myself, who's going to work hard to get things done, or someone who, as we've heard, will be rubber stamping the agenda of the Republican extremists who have been in charge, frankly, of the government that Mr. Crossley says he wants less of. They've been in charge of it for the last 20 years, and I believe we should be instead representing what's best for Lee Summit. So I've been out knocking doors since April. I've been listening to the stories of our neighbors, and they're asking for their legislators to stop fighting and to work on real issues together that would make their lives better. We need to help people who are on fixed incomes and dealing with inflation. We need to provide resources to help seniors stay in their homes and stay in their apartments. We need strong public schools, and we need to feel safer in our communities. And these aren't easy problems to solve. It's going to take legislators who are committed to the hard work of listening to all sides, finding solutions, and working across the aisle to implement them. I've worked with many different organizations, from large corporations to nonprofits, city advisory boards, my church, and I've experienced working with people who have differing opinions and bringing them together to get things done. So I'm going to work hard to find reasonable solutions across the aisle for these issues, but I will not compromise on one thing, and that is listening to the people that I represent. So if you believe that state government has the power to improve the lives of its citizens, then please support my campaign by going and visiting kempstrickler.com, telling your friends about our campaign, and voting for me on November 8th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Burrows, your closing remarks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Well, my name is John Burrows, and I'm from Kansas City. I was raised on Kansas City barbecue. I went to high school in Blue Springs, Missouri. I graduated from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. I've lived here most of my life and raised 4 children, both in the Blue Springs School District and in the Lee Summit School District. I'm experienced. I've got over 25 years of service in healthcare and the insurance industry, and I've provided cost containment strategies for over 180 public entities. I've served our country throughout the Army Reserves, and now in Civil Air Patrol, the Auxiliary of the United States Air Force, where I serve as the Government Relations Advisor for National Headquarters. My promise to the constituents of District 35 is that I will support law enforcement and first responders. We will not defund the police. Not only will we not defund the police, but I will ensure we will work to make sure that prosecutors actually prosecute crimes and that criminals spend time behind bars rather than being released and going out and doing the crimes again. I will advocate for safer communities and schools. I will promote educational initiatives that increase access to STEM resources and improve literacy for our children. I will promote parental rights. We need to know what's going on in our schools. We need to know what our school curriculum is all about. I will ensure secure and fair elections for all citizens. The key word is citizens. I'll promote growth-oriented economic policies that encourage the creation of business and industry in Missouri. And I'll reduce taxes for our elderly. And I want to hit on that just a bit. We talk about inflation. We talk about folks on fixed income. High gas prices are killing them. Okay. Folks who are living paycheck to paycheck are struggling right now. I recommend that we get rid of property tax on the primary residences for all folks over the age of 65. They have busted their tails. They've made things happen. They've paid taxes their entire lives. They deserve a break. That's some of the legislation that I'll put forth. Thank you. And you can see me at johnburrows@jbformo.org.
Thank you. And Ms. Ingle, your closing remarks.
Thank you. I want to start by saying that the Supreme Court's recent decisions have given state legislatures unprecedented power like we've never seen before. So it's never more important than now to vote for state representation. I would say that, you know, even as a member of the super minority in the state house, I've been very successful at passing multiple pieces of bipartisan legislation that are dedicated to ensuring the safety of kids across the state of Missouri. And I've spent the last 4 or 5 years talking to thousands of voters throughout the district. And recently, I've heard much about them being worried about school shootings. And I'm hearing during this forum, and I'm hearing everywhere, that the Republican response is, there's really nothing we can do except add more guns. And I really feel like that's unreasonable. As a mother of 2 children who attend public schools in Lee Summit, I can assure you that nothing is not good enough for my children. I would also say that for the Party of Freedom, what some of the things that they're asking us to do are they want to force 10-year-olds to have their rapist babies. They want to ban birth control. They want to defund public education. They want to outlaw gay marriage, and they want to overthrow elections. This is the Party of Freedom. This is where we're at right now. This is what state legislatures have been given the power to do through the Supreme Court's decisions. So it's never more important than now to get involved in grassroots elections, to knock doors and to come out for representation that will affect the rest of your life and your children's lives and potentially the future of the state. So I thank you all for attending. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for promoting democracy and for promoting free speech. Thank you very much. Please go to KeriIngle.com to learn more.
Thank you. I'd like to wrap up the evening with thanking the candidates for their willingness to participate in the forum. Remember, a recording of this forum will be available soon on the League website. Audience, please take time to share the insight you have gained tonight with your family and friends, and be sure to get out to the polls and vote on Tuesday, August 2nd. Mr. Thomas made a good point when he said we're only touching on the highlights, and he's absolutely correct. There's a lot more involved with the political process, so we encourage you to help these candidates, the ones of your choice, and to make sure you vote on August 2nd. Thank you and good night.
Night.
Good night. Thank you.